Hey everyone, Greg Staley here, live from Debrief Media. So I am live. Yep. We are just outside of one market here in Brantford, Canada. Cole Squire for the People's Party of Canada has been refused entry to the Brant Commerce debate. He had the choice of disclosing medical information, whether or not he was vaccinated or taking a rapid test. He's chosen not to, so we're going to get it clear from him as to why that decision was made. Small crowds gathered here in support. It looks like he's about to make an announcement, but before we get into that, I'm just going to put up a disclaimer here, and then we'll go get some live coverage. Mahela, this is at 1 Market Street in Brantford. Just outside of, this is, I believe, the Brant 1 studio. They're doing the debate for the Chamber of Commerce. Again, Cole Squire, the People's Party of Canada, has been refused entry. We're just going to go get a statement here. Here, I'd actually just sweep this underneath here.
Give me 2 seconds, hold on.
Don't you say a word.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Cole Squire. As some of you guys know, today was the All Candidates debate hosted by the Brantford Chamber of Commerce, Brant 1 News, with partnership of Rogers and Laurier University. They sent out notice to all the candidates that were interested in participating in the debate this morning that they would either have to show their proof of vaccination status or would have to undergo a rapid COVID-19 test. I let them know at the very beginning through email correspondence that I did not agree to disclose my private medical health information or be subjected to a rapid antigen test. So I came in this morning hopeful that we would be able to still have a sense of democracy and freedom in our country where federal candidates for federal office in Canada would be allowed to participate in a debate like this. Unfortunately, that was not the case. As I said, I was still prepared to go in there. I did go into the building respectfully, tried to enter the debate, and was just shut down as I did not comply with their ridiculous restrictions. To make it even a bit more absurd, this is a COVID-19 vaccination center building. So anyone in there that's scared of this virus is clearly going in there to get vaccinated anyway. So as I said, I went in there, I put the mask on, I socially distanced. The security staff inside were very kind and whatnot, but the David Crane, member of the Chamber of Commerce, was not. So as I said, I'm going to still go through some of the debate topics here because this is still a great opportunity to teach people and show them more about the People's Party of Canada and our policies that work for the benefit of all Canadians. So with that being said, my name is Cole Squire. I've lived in the Brantford Grand riding for my entire life. I currently live on the Six Nations Reserve. I've worked at the Brantford General Hospital for the past 6 years. I also helped launch the Six Nations Imagination Library program on Six Nations, where we help children 0 to 5 get the best start to their educational careers. More recently, I've been studying political science at McMaster University. I'm currently in my 3rd year finishing my bachelor's. Today, you'll get to know me as your candidate for the People's Party of Canada here in Brantford, Brant. The People's Party, also known as the PPC, is the fastest growing political party in Canadian history. We have done what the Green Party did in 20 years in just 1 year. Woo! It took the Green Party over 20 years to get 1% of the vote in Canada, and it took the PPC just 1 year to achieve that, and we continue to snowball every day.
Yeah.
The PPC is doing politics differently. We put Canadians and our country first. We do not play identity politics. We are not politically correct. And we take common sense approaches to the issues and policies that affect everyday Canadians the most. The other candidates inside the building, they might be nice people, but the parties they are representing are corrupt globalists. They are comprising the political establishment in Ottawa that is pushing policies that are anti-Canadian, anti-freedom, pro-globalism, and pro-communism. They believe that Canada is a systemically racist country with no core identity and are working around the clock to turn Canada into a post-national state. This is another one of their pushes to build back better. To build back better, I do not know who for, but I know it's not many of us Canadians. So the PPC and I are here to defend and protect our citizens' fundamental rights and freedoms, preserve our unique cultures within our country, and implement policies that are realistic, measurable, attainable, and will be beneficial for all Canadians, regardless of your race, your sexual orientation, or personal religious beliefs. So as I stated, I was going to go over some of the debate questions the Chamber had sent out. Of course, it all revolved around COVID-19, and the PPC has the best policies to dealing with this virus in a rational manner that does not destroy or infringe upon our fundamental rights and freedoms in Canada. With that being said, I'm happy to be excluded from this first all candidates debate with our federal leader, Maxime Bernier, who is also excluded from the federal leaders debate, and other PPC candidates across country who are facing the same type of censorship and discrimination for not capitulating to this system. So one of the topics they wanted to discuss was workforce recovery and business competitiveness. As we emerge from the COVID-19 crisis, Ontario businesses need strategic support from the federal government to strengthen the key enablers of competitiveness, including access to interprovincial and global trade, capital, and talent. For Ontario businesses to be able to recover from the COVID-19 crisis, we must stop provinces from continuing these disastrous lockdowns and restrictions that have shattered the hopes and dreams of thousands of Canadian business owners. The Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses reported earlier this year that 200,000 small businesses faced permanent closure if these lockdowns were not immediately rescinded. Thankfully, this summer we have seen things open up a little bit, but that is not enough. While the federal government has provided subsidies for many of these businesses to stay afloat, they cannot afford another fourth wave lockdown this flu season. The PPC will not bail out provinces who continue to implement these absurd and economically destructive policies. The implementation by the establishment to introduce vaccine passport systems will only further hamper businesses, destroy our economy, and polarize our society. The People's Party of Canada is committed to removing interprovincial trade barriers. We will use Section 91(2) of the Constitution and assert federal jurisdiction to regulate matters of interprovincial and international trade. We will ensure that provinces apply the principle of mutual recognition so workers, products, and services are able to flow freely between provincial borders and internationally where applicable. The PPC will also reduce corporate income tax from 15% down to 10%. Over the course of one mandate, this will save businesses billions of dollars so that they can use these savings to either increase their employers' salaries or invest in research and development. In addition, the PPC will abolish the personal capital gains tax over the course of the same mandate. When completed, this will save Canadian taxpayers an additional $7 billion a year. The next topic the Chamber had brought us was helping people in prosperous communities. COVID-19 has exposed and amplified challenges for those who call Ontario home. To ensure an inclusive post-pandemic recovery in our province, Canada needs to invest in community well-being through reconciliation with indigenous peoples, childcare, and healthcare. We need to have actual discussions with First Nations people in Canada. The other candidates do not want to talk about things such as removing the racist Indian Act, which segregates and marginalizes First Nations from the rest of our Canadians. Natives have no property rights under this current system, and this is a huge contributor to the housing crisis we see on so many First Nations reserves. Political establishment has instead responded with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. This will only destroy property rights for all Canadians and halt critical infrastructure projects for everyone in this country. The establishment's solution for affordable childcare is a complete joke. They say they will implement childcare for $10 a day for families, making it more affordable to them. Thankfully, I'm not inside the debate, so I can be a little more frank out here. They think Canadians are too stupid to realize that they will actually be subsidizing the cost for these social programs through drastic raises in taxes. The federal government is overstepping their jurisdiction. They are raising taxes and then holding them hostage from the provinces unless they agree to the terms and conditions laid out by Ottawa. The PPC wants radical decentralization from the federal government and respect the constitutional division of powers between the federal and provincial governments as well. Let Canadians keep their hard-earned money, and we will not need big government to get by. Parents should be raising their children, not the state. Now, if you want to talk about healthcare in Canada, our socialist approach has been a complete failure. Canadians pay some of the highest costs for our public healthcare system and receive some of the worst care in any developed nations. Look at the wait times for healthcare. The Fraser Institute reported in 2020 that the average wait time for a Canadian to receive healthcare treatment was 22.6 weeks, one of the worst wait times for any developed nation. Money alone will not mend the old and outdated infrastructure that these healthcare facilities have, nor the terrible living conditions that our seniors have had to live with. Our healthcare system has been a wreck way before COVID-19. As I worked at the Brantford General Hospital, I can attest to this. Even our Canadian Armed Forces reported on the despicable living conditions our elderly had to put up with inside of these long-term care facilities. The PPC will give up their GST, which is the equivalent in federal transfers to provinces for healthcare each year, around $41 billion annually. Provinces can then occupy this fiscal room to be able to have a stable source of income for their provincial healthcare systems. We will temporarily support provinces who do not have the same tax revenue until they are able to create the right economic conditions and innovations to become more independent and sustainable. So the last question the Chamber had sent us out was on resilient infrastructure. Infrastructure connects Ontarians to jobs, education, good services, and the people they love. The federal government should be a critical partner in building modern, low-carbon infrastructure to drive our economic recovery. This is an extremely contradicting subject. You cannot fantasize about a low-carbon approach to economic recovery. To turn around our economy and get it back on track, we need to stop alienating and over-regulating our oil and gas sectors in Canada. The establishment has continued to destroy one of our most lucrative producers to our economy and GDP. We are $1.5 trillion in debt and have record unemployment rates in Canada. The cost of living is becoming more unbearable, and the establishment wants to add more carbon taxes, which will only further increase these prices. These lunatics have managed to push their climate alarmism and propaganda so far that they have actually convinced people that carbon, an essential element for all life on Earth, is bad for the environment. Evidence shows that the claims of global catastrophe are simply not true. Here's facts the establishment have been trying to suppress. Levels of CO2 in the atmosphere didn't reach concentrations great enough to affect any warming on our planet until the 1960s. However, warming started in the 1800s. For something to be a cause, it cannot come after the effect. The global elite are using this climate hoax to continue their plans to implement climate lockdowns and further destroy our economy. We thought pandemic lockdowns were bad. These climate extremists and globalists want to abolish private property, take away our vehicles and implement their great reset where we will own nothing and be happy. I don't know about any of you, but that does not make me happy.
No.
The PPC will counter the radical progressive anti-oil and anti-pipeline propaganda and repeal Bill C-48 that restricts our oil tanker traffic on the Northwest Coast. We will repeal Bill C-69, the pipeline death bill that has made starting and completing these infrastructure projects nearly impossible. Finally, we will use Section 9210 of our Constitution to complete pipeline construction by declaring these projects for the general advantage of Canada. We can continue making sure that our economy is strong, our environment is clean, and our nation's infrastructure meets our current and future demands. So in closing, I'd just like to add that many Canadians might be wondering why you've not heard about the People's Party of Canada. It is not because we are just solely a fairly new party, but because the fake news media does not give us the fair coverage. And when it does, it tends to be very biased. For those of you who have heard about the PPC, you may have heard about us being referred to as a white nationalist, far-right extremist party. This could not be further from the truth, and myself as a Native American in Canada can personally attest to this as well. The media and the establishment have continued to push this false narrative because we are the only party that is combating their woke globalist ideologies that are extremely harmful, dangerous, and divisive to Canada. Canadians have a very important decision to make this election. They will determine the future course of our nation and our destiny and determine whether or not we remain the true north, strong and free, or will succumb to the demands and ideologies of a corrupt global establishment that will forever change the world as we know it. To my fellow citizens in our beautiful riding, I want to assure you that I'll continue to stand against these forces of evil, and I will fight day and night to ensure that our country remains a bastion of hope, prosperity, and freedom. I will make sure that your voices are heard not only in Brant, but in Ottawa and on the international stage. This is an election like no other, and the stakes have never been higher. You can be confident that myself and the PPC will fight for you, and we will clean house in Ottawa.
Woohoo!
We will withdraw Canada from the corrupt and dysfunctional United Nations while continuing to help our neighbors in great times of humanitarian need. We will make sure that we are looking after our own citizens first, including our men and women who served and continue to serve. We will also make sure that we are looking after our most vulnerable, such as our elderly. We will return to balanced budgets that do not borrow money from Canadians who are not even born yet. We will make sure that we live within our own means. We will continue to focus on values and principles that unite us as a country, and we will stop pandering to special interest groups. Canada is a nation that's worth fighting for, and we are just getting started. Thank you, guys.
Woohoo! Way to go, Paul!
We'll do some questions.
Yeah, I'll definitely take some questions.
So you talked about UNDRIP, and I think many people are unfamiliar with the United Nations Declaration of Rights on Indigenous Peoples, and the fact that the Conservative Party themselves has put in that they're in agreement with this plan, something the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms called dangerous, divisive, and destructive. Can you just speak to that a little bit more and why that's personally concerning for you?
Absolutely. As a First Nations person, I like the term Native American as well, but there is no set criteria or definition for what an Indigenous person is. This is purposefully vague. This is global policy that does not apply specifically to Canada. Now, this is the establishment's response to trying to have reconciliation with our First Nations people in Canada. And instead of actually looking at the core issues of why so many of our First Nations people and their communities are in poverty, are suffering high rates of addiction, suicide, and every other horrible statistic you could think of, they don't want to look at the core issues of those problems. They're pushing for United Nations global policies, as I said. So they've now dressed up the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People as this wonderful opportunity to have renewed relationships with our First Nations people in Canada, and it could not be further from the truth. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, as I said earlier, it's going to completely destroy our private property rights in Canada. This will open up our borders for self-identifying Indigenous people outside of Canada to be able to come into our nation, make some type of historic claim to different sections of our country. And as I said, that's going to definitely hamper anytime we try to put through critical infrastructure, whether it be pipelines, railways, highways. So it's extremely, as the JCCF said, dangerous, divisive, and it's downright useless. We need to have actual conversations on how to fix issues for First Nations people in Canada, which is why I'm proud to be with the People's Party, who will actually look at some of the core issues, such as the Indian Act, which actually was the legislation that made it okay for First Nations children to be put into these residential schools. The establishment does not want to talk about those things. And these entities like the Indian Affairs in Canada, they don't want to have these conversations either, because it's been extremely lucrative for them to be able to continue pushing these policies that just are destructive to our own people. So the People's Party of Canada approach is it's not officially on their federal platform, but myself as an elected MP with the PPC will fight tooth and nail to immediately repeal UNDRIP and start having real conversations with our First Nations people in Canada so that we can look at real solutions, as I mentioned earlier, such as abolishing the Indian Act. We already have rights and freedoms for all Canadians in this country. We do not need any more divisive legislation that segregates or marginalizes people and classifies them as second-class citizens in their own country.
So on the debt, I'd like to touch on that too. You talked about inflation a little bit, and what I've seen in the Conservatives platform, the Liberals platform, is NDP Green is they're promising more and more spending, and it sounds. We have to be honest when we say it sounds really appealing right now, as people are really hurting. So why is the People's Party stance to pay down the debt and not really, or pay down the deficit, or not? Sorry, to make sure that we're not spending more than to balance the budget. There's the phrase. Why is that the right approach when people are hurting and they're asking for those things they see will be helping them? And we talk about inflation as being a hidden tax. Can you kind of explain the People's Party approach and the big picture thinking on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The People's Party of Canada takes our federal deficit very seriously. When the People's Party first ran in the 2019 election, they had originally planned to reduce our federal deficit and balance our budget within 2 years. Since then, of course, we've had to undergo this COVID-19 pandemic where it was a huge opportunity for the political establishment to just further burden our country with.
I believe Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau actually called it an opportunity. They mentioned the Great Reset, which was called a conspiracy theorist later on, but sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add that in there for people that were unfamiliar.
Yeah, exactly. So like I said, these policies that they've put out through the pandemic, they've shut down businesses but tried to subsidize them with our taxpayers' money. They've sent COVID-19 relief to other foreign nations. Even the Liberals, they were trying to secure vaccinations for Canadians to try to put an end to these lockdowns. And the contracts fell through. We've lost millions and millions of dollars to China for a vaccination that wasn't even able to ship over to Canada. That probably worked out in our best interest anyway, but Canadian taxpayers were the ones that had to foot the bill for that. The People's Party of Canada wants to return to balanced budgets. This year in our 2021 platform, we've committed to balancing the budget within 4 years. And when people talk about balanced budgets, they get a bit reprehensive about it because they think that it's going to be immediately cutting social programs and other things in our nation, which is totally not true. If you take a look at the amount of foreign development aid and wasteful spending that we funnel outside of our country and the wasteful corporate welfare and other programs we have in Canada, those are programs that can be cut that will have no impact on your everyday Canadian citizens and those struggling to already work and get by. So examples off the top of my head for wasteful foreign spending would definitely be defunding the CBC. It's in our own country, but Canadian taxpayers are paying them over $1 billion a year to keep their company afloat, and they still can't turn a profit, and they're not able to they're ridiculous in their approach to covering national news. They're extremely biased to the liberals and the woke establishment, and other journalists in our country don't get those types of subsidies. So that's rigging the Trudeau has essentially bought out our media in Canada, which is why Canadians are not able to get the full disclosure on many issues, and that's why we're seeing so much polarization and division in our country as well. There's people who will actually see through the lies and the propaganda on the media and will do their own research into things, and there's the other group that are just happy to sit in front of their TV and repeat whatever they hear on there. Some other examples I can give you guys on how we're gonna balance things up here would be as I said, corporate welfare earlier. We're currently Canadian taxpayers are subsidizing these large corporations in Canada, which is costing them anywhere between $5 and $10 billion a year. This is extremely unnecessary in our country. We want free market capitalism, where businesses are able to be more competitive. When we see that the government, the state is holding these companies up, it's rigging the market so that some companies are more successful than others. So the PPC, we're gonna stop using our tax system for political ends and make it simpler and fairer for everyday Canadians as well. We'll eliminate targeted tax measures that are inefficient and serve no compelling public policy purposes. And even the issue with equalization in our own country right now, the Constitution never dictated or stated that we should be spending an upwards of $21 billion a year on equalization programs in Canada. So this is taking money from some of the nation or provinces in our nation that are more economically independent, and it's funneling those over to other provinces within our nation that either have so much regulation and destructive economic policies that they're not able to attract and retain businesses in their provinces, as I said, and then in return that's alienating other nations like our provinces in our nation like Alberta. So that's one thing that we're going to take a look at. We are definitely willing to help out provinces adjust, but we also need to make sure that they're going forward and creating better economic policies that foster innovation and drive new businesses to come to their area. Outside of our country, Canada's spending over close to $3 billion to other foreign nations on climate change strategies. As I mentioned earlier, it's extremely ludicrous to think that we're going to be able to tax things like carbon to be able to affect the temperature or climate in our, not even just Canada, but around the world. It's absurd. And the other thing that we can do to also help Canadians in our country is take on the issue of radical immigration in our country. The other parties do not want to talk about these subjects. Right now, it's costing Canadian taxpayers billions of dollars each year to be able to foot the bill for this mass influx of immigration we're seeing. That does not mean that we do not want people to come into our country and to be a part of our society and take pride in our nation's values and culture, but it means that we're putting our own citizens first. Right now, the housing market is so astronomical that it's putting many Canadians out of reach with even the thought of being able to purchase their own private home. So in the PPC, as I said, we want to reduce the amount of immigration that we have in our country right now. Right now, we're seeing anywhere between 300 to 400,000 immigrants a year. And as I said, Canadian taxpayers, they're roughly paying $5.3 thousand per immigrant coming into our country. This works out to anywhere between $27 to $35 billion that is paid for by Canadian taxpayers each year. So with the PPC's approach, we want to reduce those numbers down to a more sustainable $100,000 to $150,000 a year, and make sure that the people we're bringing into our nation are able to participate in our economy, they're able to find jobs and be contributors to our overall nation's economy. So we're those are some of the main ways that the PPC wants to approach public finances in our economy in Canada, and just, like I said, create the right economic conditions and opportunities for us to be able to retain and attract new businesses in our country.
Now, I just wanted to touch on, I got a couple more questions and then I'll leave that. But obviously there's a big difference here in the approach to lockdowns, restrictions, and we're talking about vaccine passports and mandates. Conservatives have been kind of hum and hawed about it. I believe Rebel News talked to Aaron O'Toole at an event and basically asked, would you implement a vaccine passport? He basically insinuated that the provinces can do what they want. But furthermore, Jonas Smith, the Yukon candidate, or the former Yukon candidate for the Conservative Party, was kicked out of the party for actually opposing vaccine passports and mandates. Can you just explain what the People's Party of Canada position is on restrictions, lockdowns, and vaccine passports? And then to play to people's fear, I guess, would say, how are we going to keep people safe at the same time with the People's Party of Canada approach?
Well, the PPC just recently updated created a policy in regards to dealing rationally with the COVID-19 pandemic. The lockdowns have been disastrous on their own, and with the talk of provinces implementing vaccine passport systems funded by the federal Trudeau government right now is extremely alarming for a nation like Canada. It's absolutely absurd. These provinces are even trying to pass the buck and say that they're not going to be the ones implementing these passport systems. They're going to leave it to businesses, but it's all going to be funded by the taxpayers. So with the PPC's approach to this, we're going to make sure that if certain demographics of our society are more susceptible at succumbing to any type of virus, then those are the areas that we should focus on. With that being said, there's also a lot of censorship going on right now from doctors and nurses and other healthcare workers who have been speaking out on trying to use medications or other therapies to be able to reduce the overall amount of deaths and comorbidities that we've been seeing in our nation. Vaccinations are not the pure answer. Even Merck, a pharmaceutical giant they launched an endeavor to create a COVID-19 vaccination earlier this year, and what they found was that people who had natural immunity, who had come in contact with the virus, were actually they had a better immune response and better immunity against becoming ill or fatally ill than people who were going through these experimental medical protocols. So I've seen organizations like the CDC and even the WHO, they've completely rewritten history now. Instead of saying that herd immunity is something that is achieved by people coming in contact with these viruses, they're now saying herd immunity is only achieved through mass vaccination, which is totally untrue. So instead, with our approach, the majority of Canadians are not susceptible to becoming will not become fatally ill if they do come in contact with this virus. And it's the cost benefit of these lockdowns and everything else going on just does not add up. Canadians need to make their own informed decisions for their health. The PPC is probably pro-choice when it comes to these issues of whether it's wearing a mask. If you don't, or if you do to feel safe, that's your call as a Canadian citizen. And the same with the COVID-19 vaccinations. If that's made you feel safer to be able to go out in society and live your life, all the power to you. People need to stop normalizing disclosing their private medical health information. And as I've said, that goes both ways. If you're not vaccinated, don't be showing that to people or sharing that. And if you are, it's the same thing. That is your private health information. We need to stop normalizing this.
Yeah.
So that was one of the reasons you actually, just to circle back here to not being allowed into this debate, was that you refused to take a rapid antigen test and refused to disclose whether or not you were vaccinated. So you talked about not disclosing private medical information and that being important to you. Obviously, medical information is protected, so I think that's something important to talk about. But I just want to close out on the last question I have here. Obviously, there's a lot of people, I think, conservatives, NDP, different people that would agree with the People's Party of Canada platform. But to the conservative question, the vote splitting argument is something that's very prevalent, talked about even in this chat right now. I can see people bringing this up. So what do you say to people that say, I would love to vote the People's Party of Canada, but right now is not the right time. We don't want to split the vote. So what do you say to that person? I mean, we've talked about vaccine passports and how the Conservatives have been kind of hum on that, and it seems like they're okay with it. We look at what Doug Ford is doing here in Ontario now. What would you say to the vote split argument, and how would you approach that to a Conservative that's concerned about Trudeau getting another term?
Well, my response back to that, which I do hear it quite a bit on social media and even out in the community, I would love there to be a vote to split. The political establishment in Ottawa, they're all corrupt globalists who are putting their own and others' interests outside in front of our own Canadians and our country's interests. So with that being said, they're all committed to these organizations and outside entities from Canada, whether it's the World Economic Forum, the United Nations. These unelected bodies are dictating to us in our own country what the type of immigrants we're going to bring in, what we need to do to our economy to destroy it, to be able to reach these zero carbon emission targets they're setting out. And as I said earlier too, even with UNDRIP, they're now trying to exploit the issues that are facing some of our minorities in our country to just continue peddling and furthering these globalist ideologies and policies. It doesn't matter if you're trying to vote Conservative to get Trudeau out, because O'Toole has already committed to. The only difference with them was that O'Toole said that they should have had more Canadians vaccinated quicker. And when it comes to that issue, as I said, the PPC is pro-choice. If you want to make them available to Canadians to take them with full informed consent, that is one thing. When you're trying to order booster shots and vaccinations for every Canadian citizen for the next 2 to 3 years, it's extremely concerning. And now we're seeing with the vaccine passports that are coming out. The Conservatives are just as committed, if not more, than any of the other parties, whether it's the Liberals, the Greens, the NDP. They're all pushing for these same issues right now. If you want to actually have a party and a voice in Ottawa that's going to make sure that we're defending, protecting, and uplifting our fundamental rights and freedoms in this country, like bodily autonomy even, you need to be thinking critically of who you're going to vote for. You cannot replace one evil with another evil. It doesn't matter if you want to just see Trudeau out, because as I've said earlier, it doesn't matter who you put in there right now. You can take the current establishment in Ottawa and you can split it 6 ways to Sunday. You could give the Conservatives a majority. You could give the Greens a majority. You could give the MDP a majority. We would still be in the exact same issue today. And that is one of the reasons why the PPC has been silenced and has had these smear campaigns run against us, because we are the only actual opposition to this woke establishment. And we are the only party that is fighting to put Canadians first and take common sense approaches to all of these issues that we discussed this morning.
PPC is the only real choice.
Right.
Woo!
Thank you for taking my questions. Just to close out, I don't want to get ticketed. I have 2 minutes on the clock. Thank you, everyone.
You don't have to pay tickets.
No?
No.
How that works? Everyone, I'm just gonna grab my equipment here and we'll do a little walk out. Good to have my stuff, eh?
You have our freedom and your approaches and everything good that we all want to see change.
Thank you. Have a good one. Okay, everyone. So that was Cole Squire here, the People's Party of Canada, impromptu, press conference. And so he's just, again, he's been refused entry into the debate. And I kind of like what he had to say. To be honest, we are normalizing the disclosure of private medical information by allowing this concept of tell me your vaccination status to take hold in this society. I think it's actually important. It's something that's protected under the Health Information Act. And it's something many people are unfamiliar with. Now, he's given some other answers, talking about the fundamental differences he believes between the vaccine passports and the approach of the Conservatives and other parties. But I think it bears worth repeating here that the Conservative Party of Canada, I know there's a lot of talk about vote splitting, but to be clear here, the Conservative Party of Canada, if this issue of vaccine passports and mandates is a wedge issue for you, it would appear by all measures of actions and words that the Conservative Party of Canada is more than willing to kick out people that disagree with a mandatory vaccine or passport. Now, you can look it up, don't take my word for it, but Jonah Smith, the Yukon candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada, was removed as a candidate of the Yukon simply for opposing vaccine mandates and passports. And then we watch, there's been interviews done with, there we go. Like I said, Erin O'Toole had a quick interview with Rebel. I believe, I can't remember her name. She's the French reporter for Rebel. She went undercover basically at one of his events, posed as basically just a citizen asking questions, and was asked about that question of vaccine passports. And he basically said, I'm going to let the provinces make that decision. So again, if that's the wedge issue, I think it's good to be clear on what the position of the Conservative Party is. Talked about other things about debt, balancing the budget being of importance, talk about inflation being a hidden tax. Conservatives are really, they don't talk about balancing the budget for another 10 years, if that's a vote splitting issue for you, or a wedge issue for you rather. They're talking about a lot of things. Like I said, they're promising a lot of money, and it sounds good when people are hurting. Things like 25 to 50% wage subsidy for employers to hire people that have been unemployed. So these things sound good to people that are hurting. But the issue with this kind of thinking is, again, debt leads to inflation. The debt is out of control right now in Canada. We're, I believe, $1.2 trillion last time I checked in debt. And so these aren't small sums of money we're talking about. And so have parties come out, and I said it before on my show, so I'll just lay out my bias here for you, is that I don't know how people are still talking about, well, I do, but I don't know why politicians are still promising more and more things, because quite frankly, the country's broke. I really don't know how we afford these things without causing unintended consequences. There's a time and place to stimulate the economy. Keynesian economics, I'm familiar. But at the same time, when we're watching, I don't know about you, but I got a family of 4 kids at home, and the inflation is out of hand. I've been watching my grocery bill steadily rise. Things that used to cost, if it was $100 for groceries at the beginning of all this, it's $1.20, $1.30 for the same set of goods. And that's just my personal experience. I can't speak to anyone else's. So I just wanted to lay out some of these issues. Maybe, you think I'm out to lunch on them, that's okay. But there is some fundamental differences in the platform. The vote splitting argument, I understand the sensitivity around it. But I've broken down, for the people that don't know, the entire 83-page Secure the Future plan of the Conservatives. I've read it all the way through thoroughly. I'm sure more than any other journalist, mainstream or independent. I've looked at every part of that story, picked it apart. There's some interesting things, and I'm just going to give you an example here. They talk about creating a 2-state solution with Palestine. That's one of the set goals of the Secure the Future plan. They talk about creating a free trade agreement with them once that happens. These are things that were mentioned. They want to create a special account for that to happen with the International Monetary Fund. And then things like the United Nations Declaration of Rights on Indigenous People. It's in the platform of the Conservatives. They also talk about boosters being likely and that we need to be prepared for this. So when we go circle back here to UNDRIP, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms called this a dangerous, divisive, and destructive policy. And they hinted that you would be rightfully concerned if you thought that maybe your land would be expropriated from you under these agreements. So don't take my word for it. I do have that article. You can check out UNDRIPs and booster shots, Conservative Party. I believe if you just look up UNDRIP and booster shots, Diverge Media, you'll find that article. You can go into it. It's all linked there. And it's breakdown of basically everything in that plan, good, bad, the ugly. And so go through, be an informed voter. I'm not going to tell anybody how to vote, but I just want you to be clear on what the issues are to you. And if those are issues to you, you need to be clear about what you're choosing, and not just the color of the jersey, because we really don't like who's in power. We need to be sure that the person you are voting for, independent, whatever, it doesn't matter, liberal, green, it could be NDP, but they need to represent your values. So if these things are important to you, Please look into them. I have information on the Secure the Future plan now. The Liberals are starting to piece out a platform. I'm going to start looking into that. I'd be lying to my audience here if I said I'm not overwhelmed as a journalist right now with trying to get video coverage, editing, articles, all this stuff. It's fine. It falls on my shoulders. But if you want to help support independent media coverage like this, that's going to bring you unbiased footage and just show you what happened as it happened, then please go to divergemedia.ca. We take donations. We also have merch. We have a Media is a Virus shirt. It was hand drawn and sketched. It's pretty awesome. I love that shirt. $35 for that or a hat. Please check it out. Everybody, thank you for stopping in to check out Diverge Media. Cole Squire's impromptu press conference there. Thank you.